back once more. We've got Matt Dixon from Politico and Alex Glorioso from Politico, both of you working on this story. And I want to just look ahead now. Where does this whole thing go? If these 6 women that you've talked to don't want to be identified, how does the Senate conduct a thorough investigation and actually come to any solid conclusions if they don't ever talk to these folks?
Well, if no one comes forward, my assumption would be they don't. The Senate President, Joe Negron, is, after initially tasking the Senate's attorney to do this, she's recused herself, and they're now getting an outside investigator to look at this. So I think there's a thought process in the President's office that with an independent outside look, and they have removed Chairman Latvala today from his role as budget chairman, which is a very powerful position. So they've removed him from that powerful position. There's an independent look at this. I think the President's office is probably hoping that it creates an environment where people can come forward if they want to. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know exactly how this process will work for them on their side. Right. But I would assume a lot of it's dependent on people coming forward or not, R6 or whomever.
Mm-hmm. Now, Alex, I'll throw it to you. Basically, in order for them to successfully conduct a thorough investigation, they're going to have to create an environment and create the impression that they can do what you guys did, which was talk to these folks and maintain confidentiality and sort of impartiality. Do you think it's possible for the Senate to do that after some of the missteps they've already made, both with the sexual harassment policy, appointing the wrong person? Have they already made too many blunders to even conduct this effectively?
Well, what I've heard from people that I've talked to about it is that there could be a scenario where the Senate President publishes a confidential report, meaning that the women or whomever comes forward and talks about their experiences with Latvala, they give their accounts, and that account is published, but their names are not associated with it, much like our report did, because some people are worried that if they just confidentially talk to the Senate President or whomever he assigns to investigate it, and they tell him all of these things that happened to them, he could still say, oh, well, we didn't find anything wrong here. And then they would have revealed themselves, they would have revealed what they had endured, and they would be in a pretty vulnerable position, because if he were to then dismiss the case and they felt like they really gave a lot of evidence, who's to say he's not then going to identify them to the senator himself? So I think that people would feel more comfortable if he did do a confidential investigation, but then ultimately published a report that actually laid out the accusations. And they'll have their own vetting process for believing those stories, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that I've heard from a few different people.
You look like you have something to say.
I don't.
Well, let me ask you then. The process is going to play out. How long do you think it might take? I mean, obviously, it's a crystal ball, and you can't possibly know who all comes forward. And in fact, the 6 you talk to may not even talk at all, but they might find plenty of other folks. They might find no one. At the end of the day, how long should it take? How long do you see it taking, especially with session looming here coming up in January?
I mean, the first step would have to be the Senate stop tripping over their own feet. And by that, I mean, they originally said we're going to have someone, that the Senate stop attorney was very close to Senator Latvala, we're going to have him lead this investigation. By senators themselves, this was a universally criticized plan. So over the weekend, middle of the FSU football game, Senator Negron has to kind of change course and say we're going to get an outside person. That outside person hasn't been picked yet. We're not sure who's going to lead that investigation. We were just asking about it this morning, and we're not getting a lot of comment out of Senate President's office. So I'm not, frankly, sure what an appropriate time frame for something like this should be. It's not something I've ever led, and we don't know who or if anyone is going to come forward. And I think a lot of those variables would, sort of dictate whatever the timeline is going to be. So to your direct question, I'm not sure what an appropriate timeline for this should be, and I don't know how that's going to play out.
Okay, fair question. I appreciate you guys both being on here today, and again, congratulations on a blockbuster story. I mean, obviously, there's folks who are disputing the facts of it and whatnot, but you guys put your name on it. I respect that very much, and I appreciate you being on the show and answering some of the tough questions we had here today. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after this.